Tonight's webinar is called How to Think Like an Artist. This is a full disclosure of a collaboration that Rachel and I did with the Smithsonian Institute. So we'll share a link to their resource as well. We worked with an artist from the Marshall Islands to develop this unit using her poetry as the impetus for the lesson or the unit design. It is for secondary, so middle or high schoolers. Although could probably be adapted for younger kids. I would perhaps maybe use a different exemplar artist if you worked with younger kids. That'll all make sense here in a few. So I'm Sarah Scott Shields, the chair of the art ed department at FSU. And I'll let Rachel introduce herself as well. Oh, wait, look, I have that in here.
I'm Rachel, and I'm also faculty here at the Art Education Department at FSU, and I'm the director of the Teacher Certification Program. And we're really excited tonight. This is the first, this is our 5th webinar in our webinar series, but it's the first one that students are joining us with, so it makes it the most exciting one. So we have Fiona, Lauren, and Sarah with us. They're in their last semester of the pre-service program here at FSU in their master's program. And you'll see that they contributed a lot of the work to this project. So we're really excited that they're going to come and share their thoughts. Do you guys want to say?
Yeah, you all want to turn your mics off and say hello and let them know what you're up to right now.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
My name is Sarah Myrick, and we're all in our spring internship right now. So this is our final stretch to become teachers, hopefully in the fall.
Yeah.
My name is Fiona. I am working right now at Florida State University School, working with high school students. I'm implementing a lesson right now, so it's super exciting. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
And then Lauren?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren. I am also in my spring student internship semester, so our final home stretch towards becoming teachers, having our own classrooms in the very near future. And I'm also at a middle school here in Tallahassee, and we just started a unit on mental health. So that's very exciting.
Good timing.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to dive right in. Rachel, you want to?
Yeah, so like Sarah said, this unit came out of a collaboration with the artist, Kathy Jetnell-Kijner. And what we did is we worked with Kathy by just listening really deeply and carefully to her own process as an artist. And then after listening to that process, we thought about what would that process look like as steps of a curriculum. And so the lessons here, there's 6 of them, kind of reflect what we kind of deduced to be Kathy's process as an artist. And so the first step we wanted to focus on was the work of recognizing that artists engage in research as they create their art. That the impetus for an art project isn't like a vision of a very specific final physical project, for example, if you're a visual artist, but that they're engaged in a process that and the work comes out of that after the research. So research was really the beginning of the process of asking students to take a deep dive into Kathy's work and document what they imagined was kind of the questions that she was asking in her own process as an artist. These are some of the journal responses that Lauren and Sarah and Fiona created kind of in response to this first lesson.
And I sent this to you, Rachel, but I might show just a few minutes of the video of Kathy's performance piece so people have some context about the kind of work she does. So I'm going to apologize for...
It is actually nice to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, for scooting way back. But I'm going to just play this for just a second. It's a 6-minute video, but I won't play the whole thing.
I'm coming to meet you. I'm coming to see you. What stories will I find? Will I find an island or a tomb? To get to this tomb, take a canoe. Take a canoe through miles of scattered sun. Swallow endless swirling sea. Gulp down radioactive lagoon. Do not bring flowers or speeches. There will be no white stones to scatter along this grave. There will be no songs to sing. How shall we remember you?
Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Hold on, I'm gonna fast forward this a little further in. I'm so sorry. I can't see the. How do you fast forward this video?
When it's inside the PowerPoint?
Mm.
I don't know. You're the one driving. So Kathy's work is based in the Marshall Islands. She's a poet and
I'm coming to meet
became
you.
kind of renowned for her poetry on climate change, and then has started doing performance art and film.
And what she
Will I
does
find an
is
island
visit,
or a
she
tomb?
visits these locations, talks to the
To
people
get
that
to
are
this tomb,
there, interviews
canoe.
people, takes
Take a canoe through
photographs,
miles of
experiences the
scattered
place. And these are
Swallow
all places
endless
in the
swirling
island
sea.
system that she lives in, and
Gulp
then
down
creates these,
radioactive lagoon.
goes back and creates these
Do not
videos
bring flowers
that
or
match the
speeches.
poetry that she writes.
There will be no white stones to scatter along this grave.
This
There will
particular
be no
poem
songs.
is about the testing on this
How
island.
shall we?
And you'll see in just a second the big
You're a
tomb that
whole
she stands on,
island
or the big
once.
testing
You
site. Here it
fragrant
is.
tree, heavy with green oaks, whispering promises, nested roots. Crabs dusted with white sand scuttled through pandanus roots. Beneath looming coconut trees, beds of watermelons slept still. Juice. You were protected by powerful Eloids. Chiefs birthed from women who could swim pregnant for miles beneath the full moon. Then you became testing ground. 9 nuclear weapons consumed you, one by one by one, engulfed in an inferno of blazing heat. You became crater, an empty belly. Plutonium ground into a concrete slurry filled your hollow caverns. You became tomb. You became concrete shell. You became solidified history. Immovable. You were a whole island. Who remembers you beyond your death? Who would have us forget that you were once green globes of fruit, pandanus roots, and whispers of canoes? Who knows the stories of the life you led before? Here's a story of a turtle goddess. She gifted one of her sons, Leda, a piece of her shell anointed with power, a leathery green fragment, hollow as a piece of marble. It gave Leda the power to transform into anything, to houses and trees, the shapes of other men, even kindling for the first fire. Almost burned up. I'm looking for more stories.
I think that's maybe a good stopping point. There we go. Do the three of you want to share a little bit about learning about Kathy's work and what that was like?
I can start. So I watched a bunch of her videos and read a ton of poems, and I was just super inspired by how much she cared about her people and her culture, and like you could really sense this deep empathy and care for the people, and that was really inspiring to me. And also her discussing how the climate is affecting the Marshall Islands. I didn't know about that before, and so learning about that from a really personal perspective of someone who's from there, and it was just incredible. Her work is really beautiful, and yeah.
I can go next. I too really enjoyed diving into Kathy's work. I just think she has a really kind of deeply moving quality to her poetry. So not only reading, but hearing her words, and to see how they really have a strong kind of anchor or connection to place and her home. And so I deeply related to her work, being from a small coastal town in South Florida. And so to think about the way that the land is really affected, and it kind of changes all qualities or aspects of life, really kind of struck a chord with me, and felt deeply relatable. So it was really easy for me to kind of dive into her work, and to help it inspire my own.
What really drew me to her work was her process, which we'll talk about later. But what I knew by just watching it was that she collected a lot of data, and like collected videos, stories. Like, you just, when you listen to her work, you know that she listens to people's stories and like the local myths, and then you can tell she gathers all that information and then later tries to put it all together. And that, I was really drawn to that because that's a way that I work. And I always love to see artists who like, their job is to just collect these stories. Like, this is this person's what she does, and I'm like, that is the coolest thing. So I was really also inspired because I hadn't seen an artist or been exposed to a poet slash storyteller and videographer as an artist in a art classroom. So I was really excited about that too.
Thanks. Okay, so what Sarah said is a really nice segue into lesson 2. Lesson 2 is really about asking students to summarize the processes that artists move through to go from inspiration to creation. I think sometimes when we teach secondary students, we forget that we have to really scaffold the process from idea to final piece. And what Kathy's resources, the resources that are available in the lesson that we'll share with you, she documents her research, so you can really witness through looking at her website how she goes, how she moves from researching the islands to preparing her ideas and collecting stories to writing her poems, and then finally how she creates these performance videos of her poems. So we've suggested a think, pair, share exercise to do with the students in your class. The first is the teachers begin by asking the students in a large group, what questions do you think drives Kathy's work? Then you pair them up after they've had that conversation into smaller groups, and ask the students to continue to think about what question they think drives Kathy's work, and to come up with a question, and then they bring that back and share that in a larger group. And, you know, as in any kind of think, pair, share, when they do that group share at the end, it's really important to document all that thinking so that when they move into the next phase of the lesson, they have that as a reference point. And then we have kind of a second think, pair, share that moves them through the question of what process does she do? So first we have them think about what question, and then what processes does she move through? These are the processes that our students came up with when they piloted this lesson. So I'll let them talk a little bit about, you know, maybe just touch a little bit on Kathy's process and what they took away from researching her. Put you on the spot again, everybody.
I can go first. So Kathy's process really was a huge driving force in my inspiration for this lesson, because not only does she have a deep connection with home, but I think that she really nicely pairs kind of personal accounts with intense research or extensive research, and local lore, and also other like locals accounts. So it's really nice to see how she compiles all of those things and puts them together to create a complete story. And thinking about how oftentimes we only have a small part of the story from our perspective, it's really incredible the way that she's able to paint a complete picture with all of the research and compiling that she does with her process.
Thanks for summarizing that, Lauren.
Yeah, so the goal of this second lesson is to come up with this list of processes so that students have processes to use in the next lesson that Rachel sent in.
So lesson one and two really ask students to explore this artist practice, and then lesson three asks them to begin to mimic that artist practice as a way to catalyze their own art making. So lesson three is about exploring the artist research process as students begin their own research about a big idea, so that they can explore how that big idea is relevant to their community. We made that kind of idea that what our students are exploring is relevant to their own community. We built that in because we didn't want students talking about the Marshall Islands. Not that we thought our pre-service students would, but we think it's important that students recognize how powerful it is that the artist is researching kind of her local community and focus on that for their own research. One of the main parts of this lesson that we think teachers will have to be careful of is kind of really introducing the idea of research to students and providing resources. One of the things that Sarah and I work on a lot is this idea that research isn't just reading about things using internet sources, but something that arts research does really well is connect to kind of the vibrancy and materiality of a topic. And arts has kind of this ability to access different types of resources to produce kind of knowledge about a topic. So in this lesson, we asked students to read, to identify an issue that was important to them and important to their community. And we provide some notes in the PDF I shared of kind of research, notes on how to do research that would be helpful for secondary students. But then we asked them to pick at least 6 different sources of information that could include articles, but also archival material, interviews, oral history, fiction. We were really inspired by Kathy's reference of legends in her own work, local legends, to kind of reinterpret the reality of the Marshall Islands today, site visits, either on Google Maps or physical artwork. And then by kind of asking for these different types of materials to go into the research, students begin to develop work that that becomes the foundation of their project. And this work is kind of documented, you could see here in these images, through a mapping process. Students were asked in this step to kind of map and document their research. We only see 2 projects here, but if you see your project up here, maybe you could kind of explain your map.
That's Sarah.
Yeah, maybe Sarah.
Yeah, sure. I got really excited revisiting it because I remembered all my thought processes to like where I finally went. So when I first looked at the artist's work, I thought that I had to do a really big idea, like a really big political idea to really make a statement and make the world a better place. Like this artwork is going to change something big, totally turn around climate change. And then after spending time thinking about it, I realized in my environment in Tallahassee, I really care about the monarch butterflies. I just went outside and I don't remember how I figured it out, but I was like, I need to research something I really care about. So I think that's something for teachers to give students permission to follow the thing that they care about and are interesting. So for me, that's monarch butterflies. And they fly through Tallahassee every year in October, and you can go and tag them. And I've done that before, and it's been really exciting. So then I just decided to look more into it. And I found, I started doing a brainstorming map and started connecting ideas with arrows and drawings. As you can see, I use white pen and color pencils. And I had like 3 pages of this, like trying to connect all the pieces, sort of synthesizing the ideas. And if you look under monarch butterfly conservation, it says, I think we are blessed because this natural wonder is, I think it said, in our backyard. This is from a video from a man in Mexico and Michoacan, where all the butterflies go to overwinter. And I learned that that the butterflies go there and they have so much farmland that they have protected that could be making them money, but they've protected this, forest. They could be making it into a farmland, but they're protecting this forest because it's a natural wonder. And then I realized at the end of all this research of these 6 sources, which it's important to have 6 because it keeps you going, I realized the reason that nobody knows about, or not a lot of people know that this phenomenon comes through, is because we're not shocked by it. It's not sparking wonder, or people don't know about it. Because if they really did, then they would be doing something about it, because it's really an amazing thing. So I learned a lot about butterflies. I won't go on, but does that explain the map a little bit?
Yeah, I think what's important to know, and Sarah pointed this out, is that letting students pick the thing that they research is key. It's like critical at this step in the lesson, that you want students to pick something that they're really excited about. So it doesn't have to be about saving the planet. If they're excited about they play basketball at this certain park, maybe they want to learn about why that park is there, who donated the money to create the park, how did the park come into existence. I think what's important for this stage of research is that they pick something that they're interested in and that it's embedded in the community that they're a part of, whether that's a physical community or like a relational community, right? Like a teenager issue or something that's related to their school community or cultural communities.
Yeah, I also really appreciate, Sarah, that you mentioned this idea of wonder, because I think if you pick an idea for students based on your understanding of like what's a great political issue that we should talk about, then Kathy's work, and I think a lot of artistics work, are working with this kind of aesthetics of wonder and exploration that has a really deep impact. And I think work that feels too much like a political message can be flat, so working through these steps and thinking about how do you share the kind of excitement about something, I think is something that makes art political. That doesn't start out political, but it starts out with curiosity and kind of this attunement to the world that I thought you spoke really nicely of. So thanks for articulating that for us. Lesson 4 is a really interesting lesson, I think, because it kind of asks students who have just done all this research and they're really excited to kind of take a U-turn, and instead of just get right away art making in their ways that they might be familiar with, is to kind of reframe what they know and read about the research, kind of moving away from their maps into a document, but not a report, because we didn't want to kind of narrow this idea of research as reporting on facts. So lesson 4 is an invitation to students to engage in creative writing about their big idea, to kind of filter the results of their research and what they took from the research, but with the creative license to kind of respond to the question about what stood out to you, how could you use these ideas and inspirations to write creatively about your topic and its relevance to your own community. Actually, in this lesson, the options that students were given to kind of engage in writing, Sarah compiled these, but she gave her students a kind of a long list of possible ideas for writing. And this was just another step of beginning to articulate and think alongside the big idea. And I don't know if we're going to share any of the writing. I think if you guys want to talk about like what type of writing you chose and maybe its connection to the research you did, that might be interesting for folks to hear.
So I chose to write a poem about my research. I was really inspired by Kathy's love of nature and her care for the environment, and something that inspired me in Tallahassee and has inspired me my whole life is the beautiful sinkholes and springs that we have here, and the underground aquifer and the beautiful water that we have underneath us. So I did research about Wakulla Springs and about nitrites in the groundwater and runoff, and thinking about human health, and it just kind of naturally evolved into a poem. And I think that was the most effective way for me to express my feelings around that.
I'll also chime in and say that I think the step was really important as part of the unit, because I think it would be easy to kind of jump straight from your research into like making art about that research, but to have to kind of check in with yourself and to spend some time writing and thinking about the research that you've just kind of absorbed, to process that information, to kind of make it a more cohesive thought was really nice. And so I actually didn't do a poem. I chose to just kind of free write, and I filled up like 5 or 6 pages with just like ideas that kind of flooded in as a result of the research that I had done. So I found it really helpful for idea generation and to kind of make sure that everything was all aligned really well. This step was really important.
I wrote a children's book, like it was like a rhyming children's book. There's like maybe like 10 or 11 stanzas.
I can, do you want to talk about that, Sarah? I didn't mean to cut you off. I felt like you were.
Oh, I'm sure, I think I'll revisit it later on how it switched, but I just, I wanted to write a children's book that would inspire or educate people about it. And I think I wrote Tallahassee, you're en route of a natural wonder, why do you not see it? And so that repeated a lot through each stanza. And then I would, it was trying to educate and evoke wonder. Those are my like two things.
The options for writing ranged from like in the top right is a rambling autobiography where you kind of just give them permission to ramble about like a memory, to writing a song or making a comic. You could do a kid's book. There's lots of resources in the lesson though for what kinds of writing students can do. But I think this is indicative of the kind of work that artists do all the time that we don't necessarily teach directly, right? Which is, how do you go from visiting a place or dipping your toes in water or seeing a butterfly to creating a piece that has like substance and concept and kind of critical thinking embedded into it. And so when we ask them to write their stories, then we ask them to follow up with their stories through art making. And this is kind of maybe what I would call like a bridge lesson between the final lesson 6, which is the final piece, and lesson 4, which is the writing assignment. In this assignment, we gave students the kind of charge of thinking about their story and developing their story through art making, but we gave them like 5 or 6 different techniques to try. And so my students, I mailed, or they could pick up from campus because we were remote at the time, but um, I had the jelly plates, we had paint, pens, ink. um, I did give them, the Smithsonian funded this project. So we had alcohol inks that I bought for the students. Ultimately, what you want to do as a teacher is think about what are like 5 or 6 materials or material processes that work well together. I think that's the goal of that's the job of the teacher for this particular lesson, is thinking about like, what processes could I put together that would lend themselves to kind of mixed media explorations that will be successful. So you wouldn't maybe say like oil paints and oil pastels, right? That becomes, even for an experienced artist, a weird mix of materials. So what we did was mixed new processes, the jelly prints and the alcohol inks, with processes that students already felt more comfortable with: pen and ink, markers, paint, abstracting paint. And this is really an exercise in saying, after every material exploration, so you would kind of frame them as demo days. So you do a demo and you do it for 5 days. You do a different demonstration every single day. So on day 1, maybe I would demo pen and ink observational drawing. And I might even give the shortcut of like, how would you transfer, where you use the graphite on the back of a picture, so that you're kind of cutting out the step of say it's a beginner class, you're cutting out the step of learning that like detailed drawing experience right out of the gate. And that is something that maybe you could revisit later if they decide to pick up drawing as an element in their final piece. But ultimately what you do is say, today we're going to learn about, I'll use this example of the map down here in the middle. We're going to talk about like topographical mapping and how pen and ink might help you think about a topographical map, which feels relevant for everyone, at least in this lesson, because place is kind of central. So I would show students examples. I would do a demonstration of how to get different weights of line using pens. And then I would give them the rest of the class period to practice this technique, to practice this approach. And I guess it doesn't have to be a technique. It could be 5 different medias. It could be 5 different ways to work with one medium. So you could do 5 different ways to work with watercolor. I think you can be really creative, and you can adapt to what you have access to in your classroom, which I think is important. So you would say to students, here's how you do it. And then you say, now I want you to go practice this at your seat. So everybody goes to their seats and they work. And at the end of each day, they kind of do an exit ticket in the last 5 minutes or so of class. And you ask them to write, what did they learn about the process when they practiced it? What worked, what didn't work? And this is all like really the nuts and bolts of art making, right? Like, I sometimes when you experiment with a material, you learn that things don't work in the way that you thought that they might work. So it's documenting the learning about the art process. The second thing we asked them to think about was, what connections between the art process and your research topic can you make? So for example, topographical line maps might help, or topographical line drawings might help students think about the layers of a community, or the physical layers of ground, or the difference in, say you're doing a project on erosion, the difference of ground that's higher versus lower. It depends really on what their research is, kind of how they connect the material process to their research topic. And then the last thing that we ask them to write on their exit tickets is anything that came to them, any ideas that came to them as they were working. So these can be helpful to return to for their final projects. Like if they thought, oh, it would really be cool to do X, Y, and Z, write that down, because the minute they leave your classroom, everybody knows this, the bell rings, the hallway like erupts with noise, and everybody forgets everything they did. So I think the exit ticket is critical at the end of each of these 5 demos. And remember, you're demoing the 5 processes that they'll use in their final project. So this is dictated by what you have access to. I'll let you all share. I think I put something of everyone's on here. So
I'll go first. I just revisited my my document where I took pictures of all the materials and then wrote an answer to each of those questions. And it was so exciting to revisit it and realize that like so much of the learning happens in these demos, and I didn't realize like how my final piece had evolved because of these and because of those exit tickets. So for example, or like some examples of practically what that means, what Sarah's talking about, is we use those alcohol inks, and I wrote that the inks, the gold ink made me think of precious materials, and that reminded me of butterfly wings and how they're fragile and precious, and how they as insects right now are very precious and fragile themselves, and how I want people, when they see my art piece, to feel their fragility, but also their preciousness as well. And then another process that I did was I did white ink on black, or on like a black paper. And by drawing white ink on black paper, I thought of skylines, and I thought of the skyline of Tallahassee and how that's really important. And I thought about how the butterflies almost come in through Tallahassee at night, like they sneak through the town, because I also talked to people that week about it, and they're like, I've never heard of that before. And so that became really important. And one more is, I just had it. Oh, we used alcohol inks, and I made like a landscape that was really whimsical. And I thought about the butterflies that are like flying and migrating through all these fields that people never see, and there's like millions of them, and how, again, like I wanted to evoke wonder. So I never before this lesson really connected materials to concepts, and Sarah really pushed me, and I honestly didn't think I was going to be able to do it, but she really and Rachel, they pushed us to make those connections, which I was really excited about.
Yeah, I think that having the freedom to play and to really experiment with each of these materials, but also the structure to know that your material is to inform your concept, really helped, even as a veteran student, to scaffold my understanding of the unit from start to finish. So to not only have the freedom or the ability to get to explore these materials without the kind of pressure of messing up your final artwork, but to also let that, I guess it's kind of research in and of itself to engage in play, to let that play with material kind of guide my concept, and to feel more connected with the concept overall because of the way that I was able to kind of continue my research or continue my thinking through my technical practice. I think that that was exceptionally helpful and really helped to give me a strong concept that I was proud of in the end. And I also got to learn a lot about materials, which was very fun and exciting.
We had a question in the chat. I know Fiona hasn't shared yet, but maybe she could talk a little bit about this, not to put you on the spot, Fiona, but surprise. Amanda has asked, how did the exit tickets influence your thinking? And I'm assuming this is thinking about the next step, right? So what did the exit tickets do to help you with your thinking? I don't know if any of you have thoughts on that.
So the exit tickets, I'm trying to remember what exactly you asked in the exit tickets.
Yeah, they were where you reflected on each, it's just a fancy name for, remember at the end of each demo, you had to reflect on the process. So you thought
Yeah.
about what did you learn about the material? What connections did you make between the material and your topic? And then did you come up with any ideas that got you excited while you were experimenting?
Yeah. Well, I was already pretty familiar with all of the materials except for the alcohol inks. That was a new one for me. So I was super excited about working with the alcohol inks. And I think that reflecting on how alcohol ink kind of made me think about water and like pollutants in the water, because I was getting all these sorts of greenish, blooms, and it reminded me of algae. So I think um, using the materials while thinking about the research topic, they kind of informed each other as I worked. And I kind of generated ideas through working, and I think the exit tickets helped to kind of solidify those ideas.
Nice. I think that's the goal of the exit tickets. And this whole unit is on how to think like an artist, and what artists have the ability to do that I think our students don't is they have the ability to stay inside of a place of thinking and making and creating for an extended period of time. And we don't always have that opportunity in a K-12 environment. And so the exit tickets do the work of documenting that thinking about artistic process and materials and the relationship between research and ideas and material processes, so that when they come back to you the next day, they have that to return to. It's kind of like a little jump start to put them back in the place of immersing themselves in the ideas. I know when I taught high school, I frequently would see kids just like sitting at the beginning of the day on, say, especially Mondays, and you say, well, why aren't you working? Well, I'm just thinking, and there's some truth in that you have to get yourself back in the place of where you were when you left on Friday. And so the exit tickets do a little bit of nudging and helping students get back to where they were. So maybe they don't turn the exit tickets in, or they keep the exit tickets, or you collect them and then give them back to them at some point. But it's important that they keep those, because the last lesson, lesson 6, is asking them to remix everything that they've done so far and create a piece that tells a story or explores or expands their story. It could also zoom in on a little piece that was really interesting. I think some people did that in their final pieces. And the only parameters I gave in lesson 6 was that they needed to use the processes that we covered in lesson 5, which is why it's important for the teacher to consider what processes might work well together. And how can you do some of that scaffolding without students realizing that you're building a really strong foundation for a finished piece. So these pieces were mixed media in nature. And I've got one of each. I have Lauren's and Fiona's and Sarah's to share with you. And then so I'm going to let them share kind of what they did with the remixing. Rachel and I consciously use the word remix because young people are really familiar with this idea of taking things that are recognizable. So all the work from the previous lessons and then turning it into something new. And I think they understand that word better than like make an art piece. So when you ask them to remix ideas and concepts and materials from their previous exploration and research, that terminology, I think, is immediately recognizable as taking all that and making something new out of it. So I think Lauren is first. I'm going to play her video so you can watch her book. And she can talk, you can talk while it plays, Lauren.
Yeah, no sound to my video. So I think that this last part of the unit was, as I said in my little blurb, it was a welcomed challenge. I think that my thought process up until this point had seemed really clear because it was so well scaffolded that I was really excited about kind of getting to the next step. But when it came time to remix all of the work I had done, I really had to kind of put in the work to retrace my steps and to find that kind of connection between all of the steps to create a final project. And so I did so in the form of a little kind of a picture book, I guess, a storybook, where I combined my research, all of my demos, which was really great. The fact that I got to combine all of the techniques into my final book. And then I chose the alcohol inks as like my main area of focus, because I really felt inspired by that material process. My topic or my issue that I was focusing on, I included kind of personal analogy, research, accounts from other people that lived in my hometown and experienced. I was thinking about pollution and particularly radioactive waste left over from a nuclear test facility that was in my hometown. And so it was really great for me to be able to kind of connect the dots between all of the pieces that we had built up until this point, and then to see them come together in a final story. I think that I was able to tell the whole story that I wanted to tell because of the steps that I had taken up until this point. Whereas if I had maybe started with this step, I would have only told my small portion of the story, or the story just from my perspective. So it was really nice to be pushed to find the full truth rather than just giving my truth. And I think that not only the material exploration, but also the research and kind of all of the steps combined really led me to my ability to do so.
The next is Sarah.
So I did all the research, and then I wrote this children's book, and oh, before I speak, I just want to say that I had to critique Lauren's, and it was so awesome to critique hers and see how her material process and research really combined in ways that I don't even think she can put words to. So I just wanted to say that. I was thinking that when I was looking through it. I really enjoyed that part. So when I did mine, I had this idea of a children's book. And I really think during the remix, it's important to tell your students that they have the knowledge to create something, and they can start fresh at this point, that they've gained all the knowledge, because in my head, I felt like I had to illustrate a children's book because that's what I did for my story. And at that point, I was just not excited about it anymore. And I think that's really important to notice, because I felt like at that point I was just going through the motions. And I don't think that is the way that that Sarah and Rachel are asking us to think in this project. They're asking us to make art and develop the thought as we make. So I ended up scratching that idea, which was scary, and doing an abstract piece, which is totally different. It was going to be a realistic drawing children's book that was step by step. But again, I was about to spend, 6 hours, I think we had on it. And I wanted to make sure it was something exciting. So through the material processes, I realized, and through the story I told earlier, that one, I wanted to educate those who looked at my piece, but from my research, I wanted to spark wonder in people, because that's what the man in that video said was the reason that he chose that city chose to protect the forest instead of gain profit out of it, because they were so in awe of it. So I'm like, if I can spark wonder, then maybe people will ask questions, and then they'll know, and then they'll plant milkweed. That was my thought process based on the research. So I wanted to and I wanted to use black for my material because I wanted it to be nighttime over Tallahassee skyline. If you look closely, you can see it's like collaged underneath all the paint and the layers. I wanted to layer because I thought a lot about the migration cycle and how it's like over and over again every year. And I used the alcohol ink, so I told you was really precious earlier, to make the monarch butterflies. Those are like the little butterflies that are going across and through the town at nighttime. And yeah, I think that's it. It's right behind me too, if you want to some scale.
Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
All right, and then here is Fiona's. Fiona, just keep an eye on the time. Just we're right at the end.
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, I really like the jelly printing technique a lot. So I used a mixture of collage, jelly printing, to kind of talk about water. I don't know, I had a really fun time combining all the materials, and yeah, it just kind of was reminding me of pollutants and water, and yeah, I don't know. That's
great.
all.
Great. I will say, before I leave our last few minutes for questions, that we, in the lesson plan, in this last lesson, there's opportunities to do low stakes check-in, peer-driven check-ins with students. We give some questions that students might ask about the big ideas and also about composition. And it's also really important, I think, for one longer form kind of formal midpoint critique to happen. I think it's important to use critique as a way to advance students' work. So that at that midpoint, students do these kind of peer-driven critiques, and they come up with a list of things that they're going to adjust as a result of peer feedback. Instead of using critique as a summative kind of capstone assessment, using it as a formative tool. So, you know, some of the best ideas for my work come from when people say, oh, it would be cool if you did X, Y, and Z. So giving students the opportunity to do that sharing. I think you don't have to put them in the chat. That's like all too formal. But if you have any questions, we would love to answer them if you've got them. You're welcome to just unmute and ask. I will say we'll send this lesson out to all of you so you have the resource.
Do you guys have any advice for like inspiring high school students to get involved in such a research-based project? Because I know like for my kids, I'm like the class where they all get thrown into when there's nowhere else to go. And so it's like, you know, I have the kids who are all about it, but the majority of them are like, they're trying to get done as quickly as possible.
I think that's a question that I wrestled with for the bulk of my teaching career, which is how do you get kids jazzed about stuff? And I think it's like 50% your energy, but it's also 50% like finding the thing. I think you just have to move through different possibilities. So if place is what you want students to think about, like talk to them about, or get them to talk to each other. Just let them talk for a class period and come up with ideas about places that are exciting for them. You know, I think as much as you can, let kids do the things that they love to do, right? Which is like socialize, goof off. Rachel and I have done projects where we let kids do kind of like silly filming as a way to open up possibilities for what like a film experience might look like. I think you just have to find some sort of really low stakes, socially driven experience. That gets kids talking to one another and thinking about ideas. And then I think you have to eavesdrop and say, that would make a really great topic, right? Like, I think you have to do a little of that nudging when students say things out loud that are really exciting.
Cool, thank you.
I like the research. I teach from a research start. And I think that they ground their ideas by realizing that, because a lot of students don't really understand how much work an artist puts into the beginning stages of their thinking. And they think that it comes from this, you know, kind of like bubble thought. and all of a sudden you're making art, and that we really spend time on applying research as looking at, when we talked about this workshop of ways of seeing, learning to see like an artist is looking at art and looking at how other artists have incorporated their big ideas. I'm working right now with another professor at FIU, and we're sharing this idea of 3 artists every start of the lesson that connect, and then we go into. I liked your presentation of artists connected to process. I think that when students can see, and the thing that I'm really going to take away is your the exit ticket, maybe in a Zoom meeting, becoming that little quick share, that little 3-minute, rather than having to always write it down, go round robin real quick, because that's socializing. Or maybe the thing you talked about, the starting your idea in the where did you leave off last time? Everybody openly, and no comment from no crosstalk in the beginning. Someone has taught me that's a very effective way, and I've been doing that in my Zoom as I'm learning Zooming. Zoom teaching is to open up that door for a quick share, and they're very unintimidated by that as long as they don't have to talk too long. But and they've had fun, yeah. So that's.
I think those are good points, Jennifer. I think sometimes the reason kids they think it's like divine intervention. It's just like, and you make art, right? And it's because that's the model that art education uses really often, right? That we introduce an idea, we give them a technique, and then we give them an exemplar and we ask them to make one. And so when you model that as the model of how to make art, it becomes very confusing to think about how could it look any different. So I think, what you're doing, Jennifer, makes a lot of sense. You have to teach kids how to think the way that artists think. And that's really what we're trying to do. And I think you have to do some iteration of this for every project, right? Some iteration of like, find a thing that you care about, and do a deep dive into the thing that you care. You like basketball? Find out something cool about basketball and do a deep dive into that. I think that's the ticket, is to trust that kids are smart enough to find something exciting that they want to explore more. And then your job is to give them the tools to do the exploration. So thanks for sharing that, Jennifer. We are over.
Laura?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, just a quick one, if I may. What happened in my experience is that sometimes even myself, when I create something, I start with an idea, but that changes maybe through the course. And how do we teach students to explain that, and to explain that that is actually a good thing? It's okay, especially when it comes to the writing part. You have to sort of admit that, well, you had an initial idea, maybe you thought it was okay, but then you develop that and it changed into something else. How do we explain that?
I think that's something that you have to model in the way that you teach too, that sometimes when we teach something, it doesn't work and we say, this isn't working, we're going to stop and we're going to rethink. Or my like mantra as a teacher is take what you need and leave the rest, right? Like, if just because you wrote it doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because you thought it doesn't mean it has to go into the final project. If that were the case, projects would be like these all-encompassing, overwhelming realities. So I think in just the way that we talk to our students, the way that we ask them to elaborate on ideas, the way that like Sarah gave herself permission to let go of the kids' book, right? I think you have to do some of that. You have to give them permission to let go of a thing if they didn't like it. And some of that is scaffolded into this lesson. In the final project, we asked that they bring in 5 things that they learned in the previous lessons. They don't have to bring in everything. They just have to pick 5. And so the kind of parameter of at least 5 things forces them to let go of some stuff, right? It makes them let go of things that maybe didn't work, and only keep the stuff that resonated or was really exciting. Yeah, that's a good question.
I would also say that, I mean, having choosing artists that are really transparent about their process helps with that, because students hear from the beginning about everything that doesn't make it into the final cut. Like, there's some really nice making of that some artists share, and I think that would be a useful starting point, and Kathy shares some of that in the videos that we weren't able to share today, but they're linked to in the lesson that we'll share. But also, I think the kind of proliferation of processes of 6 sources for the research, and then the writing, and then the 5 techniques, there's not enough to keep and to hold on to. And so students are kind of moving through and can't keep everything. So I think that helps with the kind of innovation towards the end.
I hate to cut us off, but it is after, and I want to be respectful that it's evening and everybody has a life. So we will say goodbye. We're always happy to talk, though. Rachel and I could talk about this like we call each other, talk about these things. We could talk about this all day. So if you have other questions or lingering thoughts, we're happy to get emails and give feedback. We'll send out the lesson. We'll send a participation certificate. We'll also send the PowerPoint so that you can have that as well. Well, we're also going to share with you our new resource, which is an open access Canvas site for you all to use, where we're housing all these resources so that you don't have to go find the email every time you need it. So that'll be something that you can access as well, that we'll send out in the email. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Hey, it was really wonderful. We were happy to see everyone. If you're interested in an online master's, our deadline's March 1st for summer admission. So just email us if you're interested. Hi, Janine.